Okay, welcome to Language Studies today. This is Language Studies Man, and today we'll be talking about nouns and gender. This is going to be sort of a beginner intermediate lesson, because what I'm about to tell you can understand as a beginner, and it's good to know as a beginner. But basically it's for what I'm about to do in future lessons, dealing with cases. That will be specifically geared to intermediate language learners. So if you're at the intermediate level, then this will be a good refresher if you've already studied it. And if you haven't, this will just be good knowledge for you to learn. So in Russian, there are 3 genders. There's male, female, and neuter. And some people might say, well, isn't there a plural? And of course there is plural, but I'm really not going to go into plural today. Plus the fact that I really don't think it's a gender. It's just taking one of these male, female, or neuters and just making 2 or 3 or more of them. And of course there are some nouns that are only plural. And an example of that would be dengi. Dengi. Which means money. And this is really important because each gender uses different endings depending on what case it's in. And this makes using nouns in Russian actually quite complicated. So if you remember that each noun changes a little bit depending on the case, if you looked at the last lesson. And within each case there are at least 3 ways you can change the word, depending on whether it's male or neuter, female, or plural. But plural is the same whether or not it's male, female, or neuter in most cases, unless it's plural genitive, and that just doesn't follow any sort of rules. According to gender, it's more depending on the ending. But we'll get into that more when we get into the genitive. So you're going to want to get used to thinking of nouns as whether they are male, female, or neuter. And you're going to have to be able to tell the difference between them. So let's go into it. It's all about learning its nominative or dictionary form. So if you look up a noun in the dictionary, it's its nominative form. It's basically what it is when it's the subject of the sentence. And if you don't know what nominative is, go ahead and check out my other video that has that I made that is an introduction to cases, and it will make more sense. So basically, you look up in the dictionary what the word is. And let's say I want to figure out what book means. And I look it up, and I see that it's kniga. 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 And what you're going to do is you're going to look at the last letter that's at the end. So in this case, it's an a, and that tells me it's feminine. And I'll get into all the endings in just a second. But as you can see, it ends in an a, and that tells me a lot about whether it's masculine, feminine, or neuter. And then just the last letter, it tells you what it is, most of the time. Okay, so let's go into masculine nouns. So let's look at the nominative of masculine nouns. So if you look up in the dictionary and you want to know if it's masculine, this is what you would look for. So there are 3 basic endings. There's basically any consonant, a soft sign, or the kratkoya. And so here are some examples. If it ends in a consonant, a g, like a g, then it's masculine. If it ends in a soft sign, a lot of times it's masculine, but not always. And if it ends in an ikratkoya, then it's masculine. So these are examples right here. So mozg is masculine. It means brain. Or it can mean the marrow in your bones sometimes. Urovyen means level, and it has the soft sign. And then chai is another example ending in ikratkoya. Okay, so if you want to know if it's a feminine noun, you look up the dictionary form. And there are 2 basic endings. There's an a or a ya. This is like one type of ending. And there's also the soft sign. And if you didn't notice, I just had to change this word right here because I forgot to change it from the last slide. But here are the examples. If it ends in an a, like mama, which means mama, or armia, which means army, it's in a ya, or sometimes a soft sign, like жизнь, which ends in a soft sign. One cool thing about distinguishing whether it ends in a soft sign as feminine or masculine is that if it ends in a soft sign, a sh, a ch, or a zha and if they have a soft sign after it, they're always going to be feminine. And there are no pronunciation changes. What the soft sign actually does in these cases is it shows that these words are feminine. So even though this is a hard consonant, it's not going to be pronounced softly. And this helps because, of course, anything that just ends in these without the soft sign is of course masculine. This is just to clarify things. Same thing here. This is hard, and it's going to be pronounced hard. The soft sign is just to tell you that it's feminine. Okay, let's go to neuter nouns. There are still about 3 basic endings. There's the o, yo, or ye ending. There's the iye, and there's the m, ya. And basically I'm giving you these 3 endings because they're really important with the cases. You might say, for example, you might say, oh, this is a ye. Why isn't it the same as a ye? And I'm telling you it's an iye. And this is going to be really important when you learn the case endings. So you can have, here are some examples of the o, yo, and ye ending. The o ending would be pismo, which means letter. The yo ending would be rugio, which means like a gun. And the ye ending would be morie, which means see, as in S-E-A. Then here is the iye ending for zdanie, which means building. And the m-ya ending, meaning plemia, which is, this is tribe. And so if you see any noun that ends in m-ya, this is going to be a neuter noun. It's not feminine. And this can give some people some trouble sometimes. So the sooner you learn this, the better off you'll be. Okay, so I just told you that both masculine and feminine nouns sometimes end with soft signs. So it's sometimes very difficult to know whether a noun is masculine or feminine. And we already went over a little bit that if it ends in the sh, cha, or zha with a soft sign, then it's always going to be feminine. And that's good to know. But here's some other ways to tell. If it ends in nost or jest, like свежесть, this means freshness, it's always going to be feminine. If it's inanimate, and we'll go into inanimate and animate objects and nouns in the next slide, but if it's inanimate and it ends in zm with a soft sign, s and a soft sign, v and a soft sign, b and a soft sign, p and a soft sign, and or st and a soft sign, then it's always going to be feminine. So an example would be жизнь, which means life, or любовь, which means love. Now let's go into masculine hints. If it's like a til or ar, like a T-E-L soft sign, A-R soft sign, and it's a person, or usually it's a person, sometimes it's not a person, then it's going to be masculine. And here are some examples. Uchitil, which means teacher, pisatil, which means writer, or bibliotekar, which means librarian. And then the names of months, those are always masculine, and they always end in a soft sign, in the nominative case, which is the dictionary form. Now for, unfortunately, the rest, you're just going to have to look them up and figure out what they are from the dictionary. There also are a couple of exceptions to this rule. Metil. Metil. It means like a snowstorm. This is an exception. This is feminine. But basically, other than that, this rule applies and works most of the time, I think, if not all the time. Okay, let's go into inanimate versus animate nouns. And this one might be a little bit tricky for English speakers because we don't have inanimate or animate groups. I mean, we can tell whether something is inanimate or animate from experience, but Russians use inanimate and inanimate nouns in different ways in grammar a lot. So let's just go over what they are. So let's look at inanimate first. It could be alive, most likely it's not, and it can't move by itself, like using its muscles. So for example, a table is inanimate, it's not alive, right? Most likely it's not alive. Chair is inanimate. Tree is alive, but it doesn't really move using its own muscles. Same thing with bush. These are all inanimate nouns. And then animate nouns are alive, and they move around using their own muscles, so it can bleed, for example. So a person is an animate. Any person is animate, of course. A bear. Other things, God is animate. And other things like mythical people, Zeus, is animate also. But basically the rule of thumb is that it's alive and it can breathe and bleed. I think the word for this animate and inanimate in Russian is одушевленный and неодушевленный. And that basically means whether or not it has a soul. So if you can think of a person and a bear having a soul, but a table, a chair, and a tree, they don't really have a soul. That's the way that the Russians sort of put it. And then animacy is going to be important in the accusative case, and it also plays an important role in whether you use a preposition or the dative case in some certain circumstances, and it also plays a very important role in prepositions. So another thing you're going to always want to look at when you're looking at masculine, feminine, and neuter, at the genders, you're always going to look at the animacy, no matter what. Especially for male and neuter. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat that most neuter nouns, if not all neuter nouns, are inanimate. And with male nouns, you're going to have to look it up. And female nouns, this rule really doesn't apply animacy, but it's still going to be important. So that's the language studies lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, love life and study hard.